Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Triplett, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmid, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruzen, President Reed.
Here.
Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Boyd, Alderwoman Cruzen, 21 present.
Quorum being present, we will be led today in prayer by Pastor Bill Wilson from Timothy Lutheran Church, nestled right smack dab in the middle of the beautiful 23rd Ward. Pastor Wilson.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My alderman, Joe Vaccaro, asked that I give about a 1/2 hour homily, so I hope you're all prepared for that. Maybe he's planned a filibuster today, I don't know, but he has me on for a 1/2 hour. No, I would like to bring God's word to us this day as we focus on the Christmas season and really the important business that you have as aldermen here in the city of St. Louis. What a blessing you are to all of us for all the work that you do. And God's word proclaims that we should lift you in prayer. And we at Timothy Lutheran Church do lift you in prayer often. We lift our mayor, we lift President Reed, our alderman Joe Vaccaro in prayer, because you have, I know, heavy work before you, lots of things to do, lots of things to tend to. And certainly you are our leaders, and you are the authority that God has given to you here in this city. So I would like to pray for all of us this day and for our city government and for the opportunity to be here before our Lord. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, I ask you would give Mayor Slay, President Reed, and all the city aldermen wisdom beyond their own understanding. Give them courage to choose the right path no matter how narrow the gate. Dear Lord, give them the grace and strength to stand against the temptation to use power as a weapon, but rather to carry it reverently as one would a child. I pray for the spiritual leaders of our city that they would hear your voice and know your heart. I pray that they would lead from their knees, and by that simple grace, bring each of us to our knees before your throne. Have mercy on our city. Give us peace, not only at Christmas time, Lord, but throughout this entire year as we finish out 2011 and into 2012. Lord, in Jesus' name, amen. Blessings to all of you and a blessed Christmas.
Pastor Wilson had a really packed schedule this morning and really been a schedule to be here for us because he wanted to make sure he got in before Christmas. So let's give him a round of applause before he moves. And as is the tradition of the Board of Aldermen, we are really blessed to have the Rosati-Kane singers here with us this morning. So they're going to sing a couple songs to usher us into Christmas. And this is for a couple of the newer aldermen who may not have had an opportunity to hear them sing. It is really a treat. So it's all yours. Could I ask everyone to stand and join me in one more round of applause for them? They do this every year for us, and it is beautiful. Thank you. If that doesn't get you ready for Christmas, I don't know what will. Turn to our regular order of business. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, I'd like to introduce my special guest, Celeste Reeder from the Realtors. And I saw Al over there from the firefighters. There's waving. I'd like to introduce him as my special guest.
Alderman from the 9th.
Yeah, I even had the mic.
I know, you were ready.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have for my honored guest today, Ronnie Hour.
All right. Alderman from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm not sure who might be introducing the gallery today, but I do see up there one of my constituents, Mr. Ben Birch, and hiding in the other corner of our former Alderman Matt Villa.
Alderman from the 22nd.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my honored guest this morning, Mr. Leroy Grant, coming off a great birthday.
Alderman from the 12th.
And members of the board, as my special guest, I'd like to introduce Tim Ogle, Special Assistant to Congressman Carnahan.
Alderman from 11th, you creeping up there.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be redundant, but my nephew Matt has finally found honest work. He is chaperoning the fourth grade class, and it looks like others from the New City School, which is obviously in Alderperson Crusen's ward. I wish ask those young people to please stand and be recognized.
Alderman from the 14th.
I'd like to have as my special guest Mr. Bruce Lampowski from the St. Louis Area Agency on Aging. My tongue got caught up there. And also Mr. Edward Zell from the airport. Okay, thank you.
Alderman from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I rise also in somewhat redundancy, but I live across the street from your school for all of the kids who go to New City there. And I just want to extend a really warm welcome to all of you today. You're all really lucky to get to go to such a great school, and I'm glad that you're here to learn about government. So welcome, and of course, welcome to Alderman Matt Villa, who's up there in the corner. Thanks.
Any further introductions? Any further? Alderman from 26?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to announce as my special guest today, John Washington of Academy Sherman Park Association, and also the former comptroller, Vervis Jones. Thank you.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest today, Ameren UE family, AT&T, and the fire, members of fire. Thank you.
Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th, want to wrap us up? Can you also introduce Gary Bess over there, Alderman?
Oh, sure, you took my guest. I feel like, no. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Today, December 2nd, is National Fritter Day.
Okay.
So don't fritter your day without having a fritter today. My special guest, Mr. Stephan, is on assignment with Santa Claus. He'll be back in a few weeks. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. Approval of the minutes. Alderman from 13, you recognize on approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move for approval of the minutes of the November 10th meeting.
Moved by the Alderman from 13th, seconded by the Alderman from 27th. In discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes. I have from his honor the following correspondence. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for appointment to the St. Louis Zoological Subdistrict Commission Advisory Board. The appointment of Mr. Holmes Lamoureux, who resides at 292 North Kings Highway and whose term will expire on December 31st, 2014. I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to St. Louis Zoological Subdistrict Commission.
Mr. President, actually this should be reported out of the Parks Committee today, so I think that probably is more appropriate.
Okay, so what?
You redo it from the appointment of agenda? Well, I move for the acceptance of the mayor's appointment then.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th, entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 23rd. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment as an advisory member to the Missouri History Museum Sub-District. The appointment of Frank Hampshire, who resides at 33 Waterman Place and whose term will expire on September the 30th, 2012. Reappointment of Judge Thomas Grady, who resides at 4954 Lindell and whose term will expire on September the 30th, 2015. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to an advisory member of the Missouri History Museum Subdistrict.
Mr. President, I move that we approve these appointments.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 15th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Soulard Special Business District. Appointment of Mark Wirtz, who resides at 2355 South 11th Street, whose term will expire on December the 31st, 2012, and the appointment of Sue Ames, who resides at 2414 South 13th Street, whose term will expire on December 31st, 2014. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 7th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to Soulard Special Business District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I move that we adopt the mayor's appointments to the Soulard Special Business District.
Moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for appointment to the Convention and Visitors Commission. The appointment of James Smith, who resides at 212 North Kings Highway and whose term will expire on November the 22nd, 2015. I respectfully request your approval of this reappointment. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from 16, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Convention and Visitors Commission.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I move to approve the appointment of James Smith to the Convention and Visitors Commission.
Moved by the Alderman from the 16th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for reappointment to the Forest Park Advisory Board. The reappointment of Lita Price Land, who resides at 2820 Waterman and whose term will expire on June the 25th, 2015. I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Forest Park Advisory Board.
Mr. President, I move that we approve this appointment.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the St. Louis Area Agency on Aging Advisory Council. Appointment of Zora Ward, who resides at 4572 Redbud Avenue and whose term will expire on December 31st, 2013. The appointment of Terry Jones, who resides at 4036 Sullivan, whose term will expire on December 13, 2013. The appointment of Ann Baines, who resides at 5774 Kings Highway, whose term will expire on December 31st, 2013. Appointment of Kirsten Dunham, who resides at 4489A Laclede, and whose term will expire on December 31st, 2013. The appointment of Bruce Yampolsky, who resides at 4522 Maryland, and whose term will expire on December 31st, 2014. The appointment of Dr. Elizabeth Wrench, who resides at 4062 Magnolia Place, and whose term will expire on December 31st, 2014. The appointment of Karen Demert, who resides at 19 Lantana Drive, whose term will expire on December 31st, 2014. The appointment of Regina Greer, who resides at 2237 Strawbridge, and whose term will expire on December 31st, 2014. The appointment of Susan Stark, who resides at 2323 South 11th Street, and whose term will expire on December the 31st, 2014. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 8th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the St. Louis Agency on Aging.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to everyone. I would move for the adoption of the mayor's appointments this morning.
Moved by the Alderman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries.
That's the extent of report of city officials.
We'll dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off any of our informal calendars? We'll dispense with line items 8 through 10. First reading, board bills.
Board Bill 226, sponsored by Alderwoman Triplett, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2309 Locust containing a severability clause. Board Bill 227, sponsored by Alderman Troop, and ordinance authorizing the Director of Streets to temporarily close, barricade, or otherwise impede the flow of traffic at the northernmost east-west alley bounded by Penrose Park and Penrose Street at Euclid, and the northernmost east-west alley bounded by Penrose Park and Penrose Street at Aubert. Board Bill 228, sponsored by Alderwoman Triplett, and ordinance authorizing the execution of a transportation project agreement between the city and 2118 Shoto Transportation Development District containing a severability clause. Board Bill 229, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 1702 Carroll containing a severability clause. Board Bill 230, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4100 Detente containing a severability clause. That's the extent of our first readings.
Reference to committee.
To the Housing Committee, Board Bill 226. To the Neighborhood Development Committee, Board Bill 229 and 230. And to the Streets Committee, Board Bill 227, and to the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill 228. That's the extent of reference to committees.
Second reading.
Following Board Bill was reported out of the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill 171, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, and an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the mayor to apply for a grant, and authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to enter into and execute an agreement with the Missouri Department of Economic Development for a grant to assist with the costs of repairs to homes in the city damaged by a tornado and associated storms that occurred on December the 31st, 2010, hereinafter referred to as the Lewis Place Tornado Damage Relief Project, appropriating the sum of $500,000 and containing an emergency clause. The following board bills were reported out of the Neighborhood Development Committee. Board Bill 192, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance affirming that 1613 through 15 Carroll Street was blighted by ordinance 64821 as part of the near South Side redevelopment area containing a severability clause. Board Bill 196, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 5439 Reber Place containing a severability clause. Board Bill 198, sponsored by Alderwoman Triplett, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2710 Russell containing a severability clause. Board Bill 205, 5, sponsored by Alderman Schmidt, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3322 through 24 Cherokee containing a severability clause. Board Bill 206, sponsored by Alderman Schmidt, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3321 Cherokee containing a severability clause. Board Bill 207, sponsored by Alderwoman Triplett, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2845 Victor containing a severability clause. Board Bill 209, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3339 Missouri containing a severability clause. The following board bills were reported out of the Housing Committee. Board Bill 187, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvie, an ordinance dissolving the special allocation fund for the Scullin redevelopment project, terminating designation of a portion of the city as a redevelopment area. Board Bill 188, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance dissolving the special allocation funds for the Station G redevelopment area and terminating the designation of certain respective portions of the city. Board Bill 191, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 210 North Tucker containing a severability clause. Board Bill 193, sponsored by Aldermen and Alderwomen Young, Rhodey, Conway, Cruzen, and Williamson, an ordinance dissolving special allocation funds for the 1400 Washington redevelopment area, 3150 South Grand redevelopment area, 5819 Delmar redevelopment area, Shoto Newstead redevelopment area, and Lindell condominiums redevelopment area, and terminating the designation of certain respective portions of the city. Board Bill 197, sponsored by Alderman Vaccaro, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 6925 Oletha containing a severability clause. Board Bill 202, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and MX TIF Incorporated containing a severability clause. Board Bill 203, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $8,050,000 plus issuance cost maximum principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for 600 Washington RPA 1 St. Louis component. Board Bill 208, sponsored by Alderwoman Triplett, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2200 through 16 Washington containing a severability clause. Board Bill 211, sponsored by Alderman Wessels, an ordinance determining that the tax increment financing plans are making satisfactory progress under the proposed time schedule for completion of projects therein. Board Bill 212, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance repealing ordinance 68182, affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, and a redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and Lancaster Ventures LTD containing a severability clause. Board Bill 213, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance repealing ordinance 68188, recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $4,227,000 plus issuance cost principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for the chemical building redevelopment project containing a severability clause. Board Bill 215, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property as indicated on the district map from J Industrial District and K Unrestricted District to the J Industrial District only in City Block 936 for property at 2219 through 33 Delmar containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 216, committee substitute, sponsored by President Reed, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a master redevelopment agreement by and among the city, Bottle District investors, and Northside Regeneration, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 217, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and C9 TIF containing a severability clause. Board Bill 218, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, amending Ordinance 67480 and 68324 relating to the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $4,600,000 plus issuance cost principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for a building 9 component of ballpark lofts.
That's in order.
Board Bill 219, sponsored by Alderman Boyd, an ordinance dissolving the special allocation fund for the I-70 and Goodfellow area, 4800 through 50 Goodfellow redevelopment area. Board Bill 221, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Flowers, and ordinance amending ordinance 68957, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $3,500,000 plus issuance cost principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for North Broadway Cary redevelopment project containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. The following board bills were reported out of the Health and Human Services Committee. Board Bill 44, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance repealing ordinance 67416, which authorizing a design build contract for an animal shelter, and section 2 of ordinance 65435, which sets forth the excess payment disposition of the animal protection facility restoration fund containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 223, sponsored by Aldermen and Alderwomen Conway, Troop, Flowers, Kennedy, and Arnowitz, and ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor to submit all necessary applications and to enter into agreements with the Missouri Foundation for Health or any area agency for the St. Louis Healthy Corner Store project containing an emergency clause. The following board bill was reported out of the Parks Committee. Board Bill 195, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance recommended by the Parks and Environment Committee, establishing the Clean Energy Development Board, authorizing the mayor to appoint the members of said Clean Energy Development Board. That's the extent of our second readings.
We dispense with line item 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill 199, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing the mayor to apply for funding under the United States Housing Urban Development Office of Healthy Homes and Lead Hazard Control Program for fiscal year 2011, containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from 13th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I move for perfection of the aforementioned bills on the consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from 13. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from 11th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of perfection consent.
We'll dispense with line items 16 and 17. Third reading, report of engrossments.
Board Bill 189, floor substitute, sponsored by Aldermen and Alderwomen Cruzen, President Reed, Rhodey, Vaccaro, Moore, Bosley, Carter, Conway, Young, Arnowitz, Florida, Behringer, Schmid, Boyd, Cone, Williamson, Ogilvie, Troop, Flowers, Davis, and Carter. An ordinance relating to Forest Park, recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment and the Board of Public Service, providing for the execution and delivery of 2011 Supplemental Maintenance Cooperation Agreement between the city and Forest Park Forever with an emergency provision.
Alderwoman from 28th, you recognize on third reading and final passage of Board Bill number 189, floor substitute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I move for final passage of Board Bill 189, floor substitute.
Moved by the Alderwoman from 28th, seconded by the Alderman from 20th. Please proceed, Alderwoman.
Thank you. We've discussed this bill pretty extensively, but just as a reminder, this is a bill which extends the maintenance agreement, the existing maintenance agreement that the City of St. Louis has with the Parks Department.
Okay.
With Forest Park Forever. I said that wrong. The Parks Department with Forest Park Forever. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any discussion? Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do rise in support of this bill, but I do still have my hesitation about my concerns from last week. I don't believe that we need anyone else to have any oversight over the use of the park, whether it's Forest Park Forever and all their great deeds thus far. So I am going to vote for it. I've read the information from the Comptroller's office and from the mayor. Both of them have good arguments, but at the end of the day, we still have an issue we have to deal with, and I don't want to take away from that. I'm willing to take this risk, but it is a risk, and we all need to admit that. It's not as easy and as clear as we've tried to make it be. We are taking a risk in one of the most tumultuous economic times in dealing with bonds and those kinds of investments. But aside from that, I also wanted to share with my constituency, so they know why I'm voting yes, is we are better off than most. I'm looking at cities, municipalities that are going into bankruptcy every day. I'm also looking at cities that don't have the privilege of having parks like we have. In New York, people are renting small square grass plots to have a barbecue because there's not park space near them. They live in high rises, they have no backyard, they have no patio. So that's an industry in some cities. So we are blessed that we have these opportunities, and I hope that this money is used in the most effective way. But I will come back to this issue when we come back in session, because I don't believe any entity needs to have any oversight over who uses the park and its uses, because we have a division under the City of St. Louis that has directives and has a process that has worked for years. But again, it's a risk. We know that, but I am going to support it today. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderman from 21st.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to ask that since Board Bills 189 and 190 are so closely related, can our comments deal with both of them?
Yeah, please proceed.
Okay. I was a co-sponsor of both these bills, and after more information became available about the impact of the bills, I removed my name as a co-sponsor. The comptroller has made her opposition to this bill known. And she raises some very good points that I don't think were really given the deliberation that they deserved. But I did have some comments I wanted to make about the bill. Both Board Bill 189 and 190 together are a $64 million issue. One of the issues that I sometimes have with how we do business down here is that we spend forever talking about things that don't really have that much effect on anything. But something that's a $64 million issue gets rushed through like that without very much deliberation. And even when concerns are raised by the main fiscal agents for the city, we ignore those objections, and we continue with this on the fast track. So that's point number one. Point number two is that the one point that is not discussed enough down here about these two bills is the immediate fiscal impact it will have on our budget. The money that we are appropriating in these two bills, we don't even have right now. This fiscal year we're currently in, we allocated that money to fill a budget hole. And without any information that our budget situation is going to be any better next year, we will probably have to look for a source to fill that budget hole again, and now we've committed these funds and we can't get that. And I understand that people, the sponsors say that this money is intended for parks and should go for parks, and we should make sure that under no circumstances it goes for anything else. I understand and I feel for you. But we've got lots of different pots like that the voters approve to go to a certain source, and we tap into it all the time in a fiscal crisis. And we need that financial flexibility to do that. Otherwise, the only other source we have is either our general fund or to cut city services or raise taxes. The comptroller and the budget office say that this will have a $1.7 million effect on our budget. Nobody has been able to tell me where we are going to get that $1.7 million from, since we can no longer get it from this fund. What is going to get cut? Where are we going to get that money? What tax are we going to raise? What fee are we going to increase on our citizens to pay for the $1.6 million we are now allocating for really what is a luxury? Parks are great, and no one in here can say that they have recognized any more than I have how much parks mean to a neighborhood. What we've done in O'Fallon Park has helped redefine the whole O'Fallon neighborhood, even the Penrose neighborhood. And we use the money that the citizens allocated through this sales tax to do that. Money that had accumulated, and that's what we used it for. What I worry is that what this bill actually does, specifically Board Bill 90, is it turns what the voters wisely did, which was create a maintenance fund, a continuous maintenance fund that will be there forever. In the case of O'Fallon Park, that usually equals around $150,000, $175,000 every year we get to maintain O'Fallon Park. This converts that money into a one-shot, big improvement, capital improvement project. And my worry is that we're going to take that money and spend it all in the first 2 or 3 years, and then for the next 27 years, there's going to be no money to maintain our big parks. And that worries me. And I'm sure it's a concern of a lot of folks down here who are thinking long-term about their big parks in the neighborhood and what those parks means to their community. when you look at the Exhibit B on Board Bill 190, it gives a breakdown of how much each ward gets. It's tough for an alderman to turn down a big chunk of money like that, and I'm sure that's why a lot of people are voting for it right now. All of a sudden, even in my case, I'll get one of the biggest chunks of money. Almost $2.5 million will come to the 21st Ward for our parks that we can use as we see fit. I'm going to try to use that money wisely, keeping in mind the long term. Will that get done the same way for every park? Who knows? Will every alderman or every park be treated the same way and things are done thinking about the long term? That would be atypical, to tell you the truth. What's probably going to happen is that fund is going to get spent down very quickly, and there will be very little money to maintain our parks in the long term, and that really concerns me. Actually, if the sponsor would yield for a question.
Alderman from 28th, will you yield for question to the Alderman from 21st?
I will.
Alderman from 21st, please proceed.
Thank you. Alderwoman, you've of course heard the concerns from the comptroller. Do you agree with her figure that it would be $1.6 million, $1.7 million of what we're allocating right now? We've been using up in our budget for the last 2 years, and we don't have that in next year's budget.
What I would agree with is that I believe for the last 3 years we have diverted about $1.1 million a year from money that should have been spent on parks, in my view, and we've diverted it to fill other budget gaps. So when you say that the $1.7 million, which I think is where you started here, was going to create a $1.7 million deficit, the only way that is true is if the comptroller, the Board of E&A, and the Board of Aldermen all decide that we're just not going to spend any money on parks, we're going to divert it all to wherever, street department, pensions, and so I would agree that we've been diverting the money, but I don't think that's the right thing to do.
So specifically, I think the $1.1 million you're talking about was spent on bond issues, and so it subsidized our bond payment on other bonds that we already issued. So it could be argued that it went to capital improvements. And I understand what you're saying. I feel the same way, that parks money should go for parks and in great circumstances. But the reality is that the money wasn't there. And so if we don't tap into that fund, where else do we tap into? And I would also add that I feel the same way about public safety money, affordable housing money, all these different pots that we tap into when we're broke. Now you're committing this one that we can't touch it anymore. You're putting it in to use an old political phrase, a lockbox. It's going into a lockbox. So I ask you this question as the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee now. Where are you proposing we get that $1.1 million from for next year?
We haven't addressed that yet as a city. We'll all address that together when we do next year's budget. So I think that I can't answer that question specifically for myself here, but I do think that as a city, we ought to honor our commitments to maintain parks. We ought to honor any commitment that we make, and we ought to make the structural changes that we need to make so that we can still have a balanced budget.
All right, thank you. In closing, I'll just say that the comptroller sent us all a letter, and in her comment, she said it would be irresponsible for us to do this without knowing how we're going to balance the budget without this pot of money. If the economic situation of the city is so dire, as is being hinted at, even from the mayor's office, that we may have to possibly lay off employees, including firefighters, to fill the budget hole next year, I think it would be irresponsible of us to prioritize unnecessary expenditures ahead of things that the citizens really need, like public safety, and possibly having to either decrease services or increase fees and taxes on our employees without an answer to that question of where the money is going to come from. I think that's irresponsible. And the other thing, again, I would just caution everybody, especially any alderman that has a large park in their ward, if you cannot answer to your constituents where the maintenance money is going to come from for your park for the next 30 years after this money is spent down, then I advise you to vote against it as I will today.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Alderman from 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I will have most of these comments on Board Bill 190, but some of these issues have been raised, and so I thought it might be appropriate to at least quickly go through some of the concerns of the comptroller. On the first one that was already addressed by Alderman French, I think that's already been discussed about the fact that these are monies that the taxpayers already indicated should be going for parks. It appears that St. Louis County may be looking at going in the opposite direction from this, but we are clearly trying to make sure that those funds that were allocated by those folks who put us here in office are going to the parks. The second one was the issue of the interest rates, and I found it kind of interesting that the comptroller said that since no collateral is being put up for the bonds, that would be Forest Park, and therefore the park is not at risk, that somehow we would be expected to pay a higher interest rate. I think that's probably correct. The hope and the belief is that there is a cost that we have to delaying investing in our parks with inflation and other sorts of issues. And so, as we do with many things, we would be issuing bonds at some cost, obviously, to try to make sure that we have and enjoy all of those capital improvements over the years, so that we are not paying an exorbitant amount for these improvements over time. And we can do the improvements such as, I know my colleague over in the 9th Ward had an issue with regard to Benton Park, where he had to wait for a number of years and put those funds together to try to make sure that when he had a hole in the pond, he would be able to fix that rather than waiting for 3 years for that to be fixed. I have a similar situation in Marquette Park, where every year there's a $2 million estimated cost for improvements on the pool, and every year I sort of look at them like, where's that money going to come from? The third one was the issue that was discussed about where are the monies for maintenance. Part of the problem is that we're not investing in the parks with capital improvements, so that we don't have a whole bunch of time and money that we have to expend on maintenance, so that if you have new things that are capital improvements in those parks, they don't require the same level of maintenance as something that's old, where we're trying to keep it together with chewing gum and rubber bands. And then the last is on the credit rating, which we should be concerned about. I don't see anything here that indicates specifically why the fact that we are investing as our parks as we ought to is going to impact negatively the city's credit rating, unless we stop paying on various bond issues in this case and other cases. So clearly we should be discussing those items. Obviously I didn't give a full discussion of those, but I do think that many of us do take very seriously what the comptroller puts forward when we're looking at the fiscal health and integrity of the city of St. Louis.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion for the first time? Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I'm always inviting different ones to come to my community to see the devastation that we have and the quality of life we have in the 4th Ward. We want to become and to continue to be a part of this great city. I love the city of St. Louis. But I have a park on Prairie and North Market called Rumbold Park. This park looks like a homeless shelter without a roof on it. It is deplorable and unacceptable in the city of St. Louis and in America that we have this many people hanging out in a park with no indication of a baseball diamond, no fence. It's ridiculous. I also have a small park called Tandy Park. We just put a $1 million or $2 million football complex there. Every year I get an allocation of funds indicating that they are fixing the skating rink, which is about the size of this chamber, and the basketball goal. Every year, same thing over and over again, but there is no improvements. All that's there in that park, in that skating rink, is full of broken glass, has not been maintained. I was promised that if I get on this bill and support this bill, that we would have our park fixed. And that's why I'm supporting this bill, because if you come through my community, I have new houses on one side of North Market, brand new homes, for the seniors. And across the street, they're having a party every day and all night, even cars park in the park. That is unacceptable and is deplorable. So anyone want to see what I'm talking about, there's no exaggeration, and we take this very seriously. I'm sit down here to represent a group of people whose quality of life is almost nil. Behind this great wall downtown in the city of St. Louis, we need improvements, and that's what we're looking forward to, is that, and if you don't do what you say you're going to do, we're going to be down here. I'm going to bring all of them into the chamber and flood the place out. But we need a better quality of life, and it should not be, we should have a park looking like, call it a park, it looks like a field. It's unacceptable. So I'm supporting this because they're telling me I'm going to get support, and they're going to take this continuous indication of money, of funds going to a skating rink that does not exist. I would say, I thank you.
Alderwoman from 28th?
Yes. Would the alderman from the 21st yield?
Alderman from 21st, will you yield to the sponsor?
Yes.
Alderman from 28th, please proceed.
Thank you. You've made a lot of improvements in O'Fallon Park, or the city has, and the citizens of St. Louis have over the last few years, right?
Yes.
How much money has been spent in O'Fallon Park over the last few years, would you say? And what are the major improvements?
Probably close to $1 million has been spent in O'Fallon Park, not including the rec center. And the way that happened is that my predecessor, you know, the park gets money every year. My predecessor did not do very much. And so what you will find is that my park and many other large parks do have accumulated funds. So when I came in, there was over $1 million there that had just not been spent. And so we have added a new jogging trail, basketball court, planted trees, playground equipment.
Okay. And the rec center, what's the?
The rec center is $20 million is allocated for the rec center.
All right. For those of you that might not have been to O'Fallon Park recently, as the alderman knows, I've been there several times over the last year or so. O'Fallon Park is a really, looks great. It's a nice park, and I commend you for making those improvements there, because I think that the folks who live around O'Fallon Park, and really not even close, but it's a big park, so it serves a big neighborhood. I think that the quality of life for those people is a lot better because of the improvements that you've made at O'Fallon Park. Would you agree with that?
I agree entirely.
Well, then it hurts me to hear you call parks a luxury and unnecessary, because I don't think they're a luxury, and I don't think they're unnecessary, and I think every park in this city should be able to make improvements so that the folks who live around those parks can also enjoy an improved park.
Although,
so,
let me correct you. My comments were about the bond being unnecessary and a luxury. A bond issue, a $64 million bond issue, when we already have a steady stream of income to do this, a bond issue is unnecessary. And if it was that easy, I'm sure our friends in St. Louis County would be doing the same thing. They have a better credit rating than we do. Their interest would be even lower than we do. But they
However, their priorities for parks may not be as high as what I hope this board's priority is for parks. I mean, I understand that it is a struggle to meet all of our needs, but I think that what you've done in O'Fallon Park is to be commended, and I think it has made a big difference in the neighborhood and in the lives of people that are using that park. And I think that all of our parks ought to be improved. And you know as well as I do that if you got an old car, I got one of these old cars, it's about 11 years old, and you know, this breaks on it and I fix it, and that breaks on it and I fix it, and you know, I'm debating in my mind right now, okay, do I get rid of this old car? It's paid off. I don't want a car paint, blah, blah, blah. Or do I get a new car? There is a point in time, and I think we're here with city parks, when really we can't just keep trying to keep the water fountains on with, you know, baling wire and chewing gum. I think we need to make these improvements in parks. Parks we'll get a lot more for our money up front. We'll still have $900 million a year, 900,000, excuse me, off a couple of zeros there, a year to maintain parks. Do I think that's enough? I don't. We haven't had any sort of a dedicated bond issue for parks in 55 years, however long 1955 is till now. So I think ultimately, hopefully, the citizens of the city of St. Louis will take a look and want to do something more for their parks. But this is a start, and this is going to fix some things in each park. It's going to improve the lives of one by one, house by house, block by block of the people who live around those houses. So I commend you for what you've done in O'Fallon Park, and I think it's made a big difference, and I hope we can do that in the rest of the parks.
All right. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 13th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. There's been a lot of discussion and concern about where are we going to get this $1.7 million if these two bills pass. Well, I know where we can get it. We can get it from the parking meter fund. There's plenty. There is oodles of money there just for the taking, all right? In the last 10 years, the parking meter division, that's the tickets that we pay at the parking meters, the fees that are paid in the parking garage, the fees that are paid, the 7 parking garages the city operates, all of the surface lots generate over 100, in the last 10 years, over $120 million. And you know how much of that went to the general fund? $3.5 million. Let me give you those figures again. Over $120 million in the last 10 years. And $3.5 million came to the parking meter fund. So if anybody here is worried about getting $1.7 million, I know where we can get it, and this board can take it. So let's do that next year.
Alderman from the 8th.
I'm not going to talk about the parking meter fund. But, you know, a couple of things I'll point out. I was still doing the Ways and Means Committee the first year. They snuck in there and took that capital improvements money from the park. And that was a unique year because that was the first year all those pension obligations came up and nipped us, and that was the first year we had to do furloughs. We really had to do a lot, and I know we also took from the aldermen 25% of their capital improvements funds to help balance that budget. And I know that that was distasteful. We knew that that's not, when the voters approved that capital improvement sales tax, they didn't approve it to go down the cesspool drain here at City Hall that they thought and were worried about that's where the money went. That was a unique set of circumstances that year. It was truly an emergency that shortage came up because that's when the recession began. We had a lot of problems. What the alderman from the 21st has said, and it's all too common with the younger people is today is, well, you know, what if we needed for something else? But, you know, my obligation, moral obligation is the voters approved the tax themselves for the parks, not for the cesspool, not for the drain down here, not for something else. When they imposed that tax on them, that's what they said they wanted it for. And it's the attitude that's reflected by the 21st Ward. Is it concerns me that the people the next 2 or 3 generations down here is, well, the money's there, we'll just take it. You know, the bottom line is how many more aldermen are going to replace us that have that cavalier attitude that the voters said it's for parks, but let's just hold on to it and spend it for something else when the voters aren't looking. That's why a couple of things need to be done. I think this is a good idea. Our parks are suffering. St. Louis County wants to close parks. You know, St. Louis County is supposed to be a better place than us, yet they're going to close or sell a third or a half of their parks. And you see the response of the community in St. Louis County. Those residents that live near those parks know that that is an integral part of their community, an integral part of the value of their homes, of bringing up their families in those areas. Our parks, and I know that Parks look different from different people's viewpoints, are in dire need of infrastructure help. That capital improvement sales tax is not for maintenance, it is for capital improvements. It is not be used for maintenance. That's how it was approved. It's not about maintenance. But what you have the opportunity to do is make infrastructure improvements in your parks for your community, for the residents, for the future generations of people, whether it's the young people that want to jog, the people that want to play on swing sets, people that want to utilize the parks, and there's restrooms actually there that work and are handicapped accessible. Those are the types of improvements our residents want here in the city of St. Louis. We have the space, but we want to make it so that we can utilize it. And you know, I'm fortunate that I have Tower Grove Park in my area. It has serious drainage issues, and the amount that we get every year would never fix that. And it's something that would be an improvement that will help for 20, 40, 50 years, and it's not a pretty improvement. It would be like you putting in a new plumbing stack in your house. It cost you $10,000, but it didn't make your house look any prettier. But it did guarantee that your house will continue to be operable, or similar to a roof, that if you make infrastructure improvements, and the entities that are, and the people that are looking at the improvements that need to be needed in these parks, you got to make sure that you're conscientious that these have to be improvements that will span the test of time. And I know that there will be future people, and future people that don't think that that's what the rules are, and there'll be future politicians that don't think that, well, when the voters aren't looking, we'll sneak it and grab it. But the key thing is, it is everybody's responsibility to make sure that this is spent to benefit the greatest number of residents. Make our parks usable. Make our parks an asset to our community. Make our parks leverage the value of our housing stocks, our schools, and the livability of the city of St. Louis. We have a great opportunity at this point in time. Look at the problems St. Louis County has going on today with their budget and their problems and how to respond to it. We've already encountered those. We've gotten over that hurdle, over that threshold. 1.7 million, our general revenue is $450 million. Parks are among the most necessary, important thing to the residents of the 8th Ward, and I'm sure in your wards. This guarantees us that no future politicians will interfere with our ability to improve take our parks money and prevent us from improving our parks. And I would strongly, when you look at the arguments of the people against it, you realize that they want to undermine what the voters wanted and have that money available for some other purpose that wasn't the intended purpose. And you know, I feel bad 2 years ago that we took your capital improvements money, that they held back on the parks. That was an emergency year, but they have plenty of opportunity and plenty of forward vision to look to avoid those types of circumstances going forward. Thank you.
Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we can sum this up in a way by echoing your comments for yesterday on the radio. You said a park in good shape is a community asset, and a park in bad shape is a community liability. And if we pass this, we can take a certain number of our parks who may be liabilities currently and turn them into assets. And that's what I hope we do. Two other quick points. I think the best argument against this is perhaps the fact that we're going to forgo some maintenance money into the future. However, the same people making those arguments are asking us to take the money that would be that maintenance money and spend it in other areas. So we're not going to have this maintenance fund if we're pulling out this $1.7 million every year, spending it on pensions, spending it on the streets department, whatever. It's not going to be there anyway. And the third point is that I've made similar comments the last 2 weeks. We have a forest park master plan that we can envision completing. We have a lot of plans in St. Louis that are plans that are never finished. In this case, we got a plan that the city, private donors, community organizations put together, and we can see on the near horizon that it can be completed. And I think completing a plan is incredibly empowering for St. Louis. And when that happens, you know, this is speculation, but it's a big hope of mine that the organization Forest Park Forever, when the Forest Park Master Plan is completed, can broaden the scope of what they think their organization can do and look at some of the other parks we have in St. Louis and put some attention to those, because I think we have unique assets in those other parks that you could build the same kind of community support for that Forest Park Forever has done. And so with that, I hope everyone votes in the affirmative today. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I just have a couple of comments based on my observations for the past couple of weeks regarding the discussion for these two board bills. I personally wish that both the board bills would have been separated. I believe that that would have been a bit easier. I think that my colleague from the 21st Ward made a very good point when he talked about that this is a big issue, and rushing to vote on it is not really for the benefit of this entire legislative body. I do have a couple of issues. It was almost like being in a crazy dream when my colleague from the 8th Ward talked about protecting the fund and making sure that the money that was set aside to go to the Parks Department actually went to the Parks Department. We were actually here at a situation that was not unsimilar to this situation when we were discussing the budget. If you remember, we were also dealing with the affordable housing money that had been cut. And this was money that was set aside by the voters to go towards affordable housing in the city. At that time, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee did not put up a fight. He didn't exert an effort or an argument to make sure that that money got to where it was supposed to go. And also, reading this memorandum by our mayor, I just have a couple of problems with his response. One of the reasons in the suggestions that he says that we should support this board bill is he says that the city must address budget issues by not starving our parks. Unfortunately, our mayor didn't feel the same way when he could have had an opportunity to make sure that the money that was supposed to go to affordable housing, it did not go there. He also says that the rest of city government should not bear the brunt of the burden either, meaning that the parks, because we are in a budget crisis, should not receive their money as well. This is the same situation that many of our low-income residents faced as well, of making sure that they received affordable housing dollars. So what I want to do is just say that I think it's unfortunate that those in leadership have made it important to preserve and protect the funding for parks, but where were they? Where was their voice when it was time to protect the interests of our low-income residents and the poor in this city? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 17th.
Yes, Mr. President. I was kind of holding off thinking that we were going to discuss my bill when it was before us, but since we're discussing it and my colleague from the 28th is bearing the burden, most of the objections, I thought I'd at least come and, I guess, defend my board bill, because frequently how this happens is my board bill will come up, and since everybody will have talked about this one, there won't be an opportunity to perhaps address them at that time. The first issue I'd like to discuss is where the alderman from the 21st Ward was talking about why are we setting such a priority in tying up the money for parks. You know, wouldn't we do this with all the other departments in the city? We wouldn't have any money. Well, the difference here is that other people are putting money into the pot. And if we could go ahead and have donors come in and endow our trash collection process, I'd be up here supporting that. When I introduced my board bill or spoke about it several weeks ago, I said my #1 priority in all of this stuff was going for the money. We have an opportunity to get a gift, a substantial amount of gift that's going to endow Forest Park, and we're making sausage down here. It's not a pretty process, but you go ahead and you try to do what you got to do, and to think that someone has to work this hard to go ahead and give the city, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, it just, you know, is mind-boggling. But that's what motivated me, and that's why I think parks in this particular bond issue deserve a special treatment as we go through this. Now, the next thing is why, you know, I've heard several comments about rushing. Why are we rushing this? You know, why are we doing this so quickly? Well, let me answer why we need to do this and why we need to do it now. This is approaching the end of the year. For those of you who are involved in taxes and everything, there's a lot of tax planning that happens near the end of the year. If you're a foundation and you haven't contributed a certain amount of money, I believe it's 5% of your corpus, you get penalized for not going ahead and making those contributions. If you're an individual and you don't make those tax-exempt contributions by the end of the year, you can't take the deduction this year. So Forest Park Forever has identified a number of donors who are interested in taking advantage of it this year, this calendar year, before we run out of time. So that's the urgency on it. Now, as far as the hurry up aspect of it, we distributed a letter, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, where the comptroller was contacted 18 months ago about what was planned here, and believe it or not, and I find this hard to believe, now we're all aldermen and we're all advocates for our neighborhoods and stuff, and we live and die. We are the face of city government. We're where the rubber meets the road, and we live on our phones. We don't return our phone calls, we don't get reelected. And if you can imagine somebody calling your office and telling them that they want to go ahead and take $4 million of your expenses out of the city budget, or they want to move in 100 jobs or 500 jobs or 1,000 jobs, you'd be all over that phone call. We down here spend money before we even collect it in the form of a TIF, tax abatement, and so forth. And we make all kinds of agreements contingent upon us, you know, on people moving in and we doing something in exchange. Somebody moves a business in down here, we cut their taxes, they'll move it in and they'll bring the 100 jobs in if we cut their taxes in the building that they move into. So we have somebody who wants to give us $100 million so that $4 million a year will go to the parks, to Forest Park, so that we can offload that expense, but they want to make sure that it happens. So that request came to the comptroller 18 months ago, and you may find it hard to believe, but after she and I had our bit of discussion down here on the floor, it wasn't until the following Monday that she agreed to meet with those people. And I can't imagine how anybody in this floor of the Board of Aldermen who would have had 5 people showing up, you know, had somebody wanting to move 5 jobs in their ward, wouldn't have returned that phone call, much less somebody who's going to bestow upon the city a $4 million endowment for our park. I would have broken my leg to go down there. I think the president would. I think the mayor would. I can't understand why the comptroller didn't agree to meet with them. So this is not a hurry-up thing. It may look like a hurry-up thing, but it's been working on for 18 months, and the reason we're trying to hurry up is because we've been waiting around for the comptroller to help her figure out how we might do this. Now let me get on down to the next issue. Why the $64 million? Well, we needed the $30 million to get the gift, and we need 15 votes down here. At that meeting, the following Monday, from the time she spoke down here, at that meeting I said, under what circumstances would you support the $30 million bond issue? And I said, would you go ahead and separate it, and we'll go back down to the Board of Aldermen and talk to them about taking the $34 million off. That wasn't even discussed, and she didn't agree to that. So, you know, that's why we have the $64 million. Incidentally, I was willing to sell everybody out to get the comptroller's support. I think I said that my primary goal all along was to get the gift, and if I had to sell all of you out to get the gift, I would have. And I said that at committee. I said it on the floor of the Board of Aldermen that first day, and I'm saying it today. I'll sell all of you out if we can get the comptroller's support, if that's what it takes to get the gift. But she didn't agree to work with us on that front. Then let me just say, what about the credit rating? I mean, I've always prided myself on math, but maybe we can help me with this. We borrow $64 million.
Alderman, from the 17th, as you proceed, I allowed the aldermen from the 21st a little bit of leeway so that, because they're so closely related, so when you're talking about these bond issuances, if we're talking about the debt and everything else, it's hard to separate those comments. So as you begin this next part, try to narrow, make sure keep the focus narrow.
I will conclude my comments on the bond issue and just, if I could finish another sentence, and then I'll hone back in on this board bill, okay? Yeah, okay. I just wanted to say, credit rating, math is pretty simple. We borrow $64 million. We get somebody to endow us for $130 million. That's 15% of what our outstanding debt is. You know, the math's easy. The only way we're going to hurt our credit rating if Moody's sees this debate somehow or another and finds out that our chief financial officer, after 18 months, hasn't been able to figure out a way to get us a $30 million gift. That's my last comment on the bonds. I want to go ahead and talk actually about the Alderwoman from the 28th board bill for a second, which is us sharing control of the park with Forest Park Forever. And there's, I guess, some questions about whether or not we should do that. And my answer is why not and who else? I mean, we've already had a cooperative relationship with Forest Park Forever for a number of years. They demonstrated their good faith by already raising well over $100 million. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have the boathouse. We wouldn't have the Grand Basin. We wouldn't have the dual bike path. And we wouldn't have half of the wonderfully restored, we wouldn't have the World's Fair Pavilion, all the wonderfully restored features and assets that make Forest Park so special. So, you know, I think both of these board bills make perfect sense, and I would encourage you to vote for both of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Now, Alderman from the 21st, you heard what I said to the Alderman from the 17th. We're going to discuss the next board bill next. Keep your comments focused very narrowly on this. I know when you begin to talk about the debt and everything else, it's hard not to, but we still have a whole nother discussion that's going to happen on the next board bill.
I'll save my comments for the next discussion.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 28th, you recognize the close on Board Bill 189, floor substitute.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask for all of your vote. Thank you for all of your good thoughts and all of the conversation on this. This is a big and important thing. So I'm happy that we've been able to have all the discussion that we have had over the last few weeks or months. And with that, I would renew my motion and ask you for a yes vote, an aye vote.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 28th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 189 for substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman True. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Triplett. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Aye. Alderman Ortman. Aye. Alderman Vollmer. Aye. Alderman Villa. No. Alderman Arnowitz. Aye. Alderman Wessels. Aye. Alderwoman Howard. Aye. Alderwoman Florida. Aye. Alderwoman Behringer. Aye. Alderman Rhodey. Aye. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. Aye. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Kennedy. Aye. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Vaccaro?
Aye. Alderwoman from the 7th is aye.
24 aye votes, 3 no votes, 1 present.
By your vote, your third read and finally passed Board Bill 189, floor substitute.
Board Bill 190, floor substitute, sponsored by Aldermen and Alderwomen Rhodey, President Reed, Cruzen, Vaccaro, Moore, Bosley, Conway, Young, Arnowitz, Florida, Behringer, Schmid, Boyd, Cone, Williamson, Ogilvie, Troop, Flowers, Davis, and Carter.
Alderman from the
An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing and directing the comptroller to issue requests for proposal to secure bond counsel, financial advisors, underwriters counsel, and any other services necessary to prepare documents required to issue bonds containing a severability clause.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill number 190, floor substitute.
Yes, Mr. President, I move for third reading and final passage.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Alderman, any discussion?
I renew my motion.
All right, it's been moved. Alderman from the 21st?
Yes, I did have a few comments. Thank you, Mr. President. One of the benefits of debating is that the more you debate, often the more truth comes out. What is clear is that this was always just about Forest Park. This was about getting the money to Forest Park. And in order to do that, as the sponsor of this bill now has admitted, to get the votes, everybody's got to get something down here. That's what it's always, that's how things have always been down here, and this one is no different. So this bill here it makes promises to every ward, every alderman in the city. If the alderman from the 17th, the bill sponsor, would yield to a question.
Alderman from the 17th, will you yield for questioning to the alderman from the 21st?
Yes, I'll be glad to yield.
Alderman from the 21st, please proceed.
Alderman, we've had at least 2 aldermen, including the alderman from the 4th, say that one of the reasons they are supporting the previous bill was because they are promised this much for their parks that have gotten almost nothing for years. But these numbers that are promised aren't really real numbers, are they? Just from the letter from the comptroller, she points out that the promise of $34 million is not a real promise because depending on what the interest rate is going to be, it's going to be less than $34 million. Less than $34 million, number one. Number 2, if she does as she has said she would do, which is really the fiscally responsible thing, which is not issue all $34 million up front, because quite frankly there isn't $34 million of work to be done in the first year or the second year, and we just be paying interest on money we're not even spending. The pot is going to be significantly smaller to be distributed among these parks. So these numbers aren't real numbers. Is that correct?
Alderman, I believe in the committee, in the handout of the committee, the thrust of it was the formula at which the money was going to be allocated. There was an exhibit at the committee level that showed an estimated range of somewhere between 30 and 40 million, depending upon what interest rates we might get at time of issuance.
Based on acreage and based upon if the comptroller issues all 30 or 34 million up front?
I believe, and I'm not in a position to go ahead and I'm certainly not an attorney, but historically when situations where the comptroller has refused to do things that the Board of Aldermen and the rest of E&A has done and has refused to go ahead and perform what is no longer a policy-making activity, but an administrative activity, that we can seek court relief, and that has been done historically.
Okay. So let me ask you another question. Essentially what this bill does is transform maintenance money into major project money. What happens when the money is spent, and what happens if that money is spent down in the first 2-3 years? That's probably what will happen. What happens to the major parks in the city when there isn't, when the maintenance money, which most people already say is not enough to keep the parks up to a level we already want them. If that's cut by 75% for the next 27 years, how's that going to affect the major parks, including in my ward, O'Fallon Park, and near my ward, Fairground Park?
Well, I'd like to say two things to that. Again, immediately after the committee hearing, I believe it was the alderman from the 11th who raised the issue about, is this a bunch of make work or not? I requested the director of parks to go ahead and compile a list of stuff that was broken now. So while you're worried about your question, while it's a valid question and I respect it, is what happens when something breaks 5 years from now? And the intent of that list, which I had my secretary distribute via email, I believe, to everybody, and I requested comments from it, and I received none. I asked the director of parks, are these real projects? What's broken now? And share that with us and distribute it. And that number was well above the $34 million that this bond issue will cover. So with the idea of that was while it's great to worry about fixing something 5 years from now, there's plenty of stuff right now in our parks that is broken and needs fixing. So that's kind of answer one. The second answer I thought we had gone through fairly extensively twice before, and we provided these exhibits for you, which was on everyone's desk. And much of that money was not necessarily for maintenance. It was actually coming from sales tax money that was meant to be spent on capital improvements. And some of that money was previously dedicated to a bond issue in Forest Park. And so without getting into all the details, and I don't have all my exhibits here, much of the money was dedicated for infrastructure as a result of this half-cent sales tax. Perhaps not all of it, but much of it was. And then there was also the subsequent tax for the metro parks, which was also intended, I believe, primarily for infrastructure improvements.
So I guess I was still looking for an answer to the question is, even if you take this money and transform it from maintenance money over to big project money.
I'm sorry, infrastructure is not maintenance. Infrastructure is capital improvements.
But things break down. So let's say, let's say,
Alderman, your question presupposes a wrong answer.
Let me rephrase the question. If you use this money to build a new basketball court or a new jogging trail, as we've done, a new tennis court, new playground equipment, you build it, but you no longer have any money to maintain it, isn't that a problem?
Well, I think I attempted to try to answer that. When that tennis court or jogging path that you build over the years eventually erodes, corrodes, breaks, and is no longer usable, we have well over $34 million worth of projects that right now are broken and can't be used in our parks. So while you may be worried about your park 5 years from now, there's a number, we shared the exhibits with everybody and we got no comments back saying, take that off the list, that's really not broken. So we shared that list with everybody and the list was, I can't remember the number, but it was $60, $70 million of stuff that's broken today that really needs to be fixed. And when you go out to fix that and you spend $50,000 fixing the tennis courts that you had put in 15 or 20 years earlier, that's considered not maintenance, it's considered capital improvements.
Okay. So, Mr. President, my comments will just conclude with what is clear, as I said in my opening statement, I'm concerned that we are putting short-term interest over long-term interest. And in the case of parks that serve my neighborhood, we have long-term needs. And what the citizens did several years ago by creating this new sales tax to go for continuous maintenance for now to eternity is one of the best things that we've done in this city in a long time. And now this transforms that into a big pot of money that we can eat up how we want to eat up, spend how we want to spend, and when it's gone, we'll be paying for that party for the next 25 years. That's my concern.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the late President Ronald Reagan was once quoted as saying, "Facts are stupid things." This Wednesday, I think it was dated 11/30/11, we had a memo from the comptroller and finally got some facts as to what this thing might cost us. The biggest fact that I gleaned from that was we have about $962 million in outstanding debt. That, to me, is a scary number. The other thematic device which I think permeated that brief memo was, why are we incurring more debt now? I guess my frustration with this, and I've been involved in it in its embryonic stages when we heard the two bills together in committee some 6 or 7 weeks ago, it appears to me that the director of parks, who I've known a long time, came to somebody with a wish list and said, "This is my wish list." My question is, did room 200 ask Nick Young how bad his trucks are? Did they ask the director of streets how bad the bridges that we drive over to get to our model park system is going to be? Did they ask Chief Jenkinson how worn out the fire trucks are? And I just think on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm only speaking for the southeast corner of the city, people that have given our family the privilege of serving in this board a long time, I don't hear complaints about Cronlet Park. Maybe it's because the alderman to my left and my previous successor, my nephew, did such a good job of maintaining it. Cronlet Park is in the best shape now that it's ever been in, and I can attest to that because I've lived across the street for a lot more years than I'd like to tell you, plus 60. So I guess my question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are our parks, and is this the best thing to borrow money for? We've got a declining fund balance. I think all of us realize in the absence of our city earnings tax, what do you think our bond rating would be? Now, whether we like it or not, fortunately the people went and reimposed that for another 4 or 5 years, but we would have the bond rating agencies circling this building like vultures if something happened to that. And nothing in today's day and age surprises us, so that's not necessarily a long-term given. I think that the timing on this is somewhat of a hype. I will guarantee you that the reason that the big givers are going to give money away between now and the end of the year is A, because they can, and B, it's a big tax write-off. That's not going to change. That is not going to change. What if our sales taxes decline? Stop and think about the lack of retail we as a city of St. Louis have. There is no given that these sales taxes are even going to stay comatose. That's a genuine concern of mine. You know, the buck has to stop at this level here. What we're about to do here this morning flies in the face of everything I read, of everything they're doing all across the country. We're about to go and borrow money. Whether you like it or not, and we don't know how much the money's going to cost us, but we're going to have a wonderful park system, which I think we already have. And we're going to have the luxury of a pot full of money to spend on our park system, but we're not Chicago. We have 318,000 people living here, and if your car is broken into, if they can't put out the fire, if your garage starts on fire, if you had to drive across an unsafe bridge to get to the parks, I question the logic in this particular proposal. I don't know what this means. Moody's 2011 credit rating, we have a high debt burden, and we're well above state and national medians. So let's just issue $64 million more of debt. You know, debt is not always a good thing. The economy, this is going to surprise all of us, is limping along, and you want to know why? Debt. If this were before my household, and I don't have any kids, but if my first wife, Karen, and I sat at the kitchen table and said, well, we're relatively debt-free, and then she said, well, what about the 3 city pension systems? Then I would say, well, you know, you're right. Let's not borrow any money. We all know those things are virtual time bombs, which are eventually going to bring this city to its knees if we don't take a more proactive approach. So, with the first thing, I'm going to congratulate the alderman from the 12th. When I was elected, he gave me a gift subscription to the Atlantic. And this is a quote from the Atlantic. It said that, in our economic times, debt is a silent assassin. A little bit strong, but I thought he was sending me a book on fish or something when I got the Atlantic, so I wasn't real clear. Between 2001 and 2007, this country, we individuals, went on an incredible borrowing binge. An incredible borrowing binge. The household debt in America in that time simply doubled. Let's just take a brief back, and I'm about to close here, but what about the people that bought those wonderful airport bonds, Lambert International Airport? Well, the old DC-10 ain't what she used to be. Things changed out at that airport. What about the people that bought the bonds for our now infamous Convention Center Hotel? How would you like to be holding those little numbers? Those are some wonderful things to have in your portfolio. So I guess in closing, I just don't hear complaints from the people in the 11th Ward about how bad a shape Cronlet Park is in. I do hear a myriad of other complaints, and I think the fact that the comptroller is not on board with this, clearly the budget director, and I'm not, I don't know that there's a gag order on the budget director, but he doesn't like this thing. So we're going to take the city's chief fiscal officer and the young man that sees the money coming and going on a daily basis and take their opinion, because Room 200 and the Parks Director wants to move forward with, I think, an ill-conceived proposal. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I respect very much the 11th Ward Alderman's opinions about, and I did mention this earlier, because of the fiscal times, and we should be very concerned about the fiscal health of the city. And I can't guarantee if we do have these bonds issued or we don't issue these bonds, I still think we're going to be up against it with regard to our fiscal health. But in terms of borrowing, you know, we borrowed for a lot of things, for stadiums and hotels and all of those sorts of things, which looked very good at the time and may, for some, still look good. But when, you know, as I'm listening to some of the things that we're talking about today, if I boil it down, it seems to me at least that what we're doing is we're stealing from our kids to pay for all these other things. And yes, we do need to do those roads, and yes, we need to do the other things, but our parks, I mean, I do get complaints about the state of our parks. I absolutely do. I don't have a quote, major park, a huge park, where we protected that funding. I don't have any of those. What I have are the smaller parks, the parks that the kids are looking at to do something as opposed to finding fun doing stuff someplace else. And no, this will not provide the programming that we need, the programming like the alderman from the 13th many moons ago with his wife and others down here have done over the years. It's not going to provide that programming, but at least it'll give a decent place where kids will find it appropriate and fun and a healthy environment to be in those parks. This is the time to borrow money if you can get the money, because the rates are lower than they have been for many years. We're having a very important philosophical argument that's more than philosophical, because we're talking about where the rubber meets the road, about what you borrow for. Do you borrow for some of the things that have been borrowed for in the past so that we do have these high levels of debt? And I think some mistakes, Monday morning quarterbacking, some mistakes probably have been made. But does that mean that we now, at a time when we're going to get some additional revenues, when people have shown that we have access to other capital coming in here, and even though I know the alderman from the 17th said he was willing to sell us out, we have a real opportunity now not to just have that all in one crown jewel. We're not going to have just a downtown St. Louis kind of syndrome again. We're not just going to have Forest Park shining and shining more because the rest of the parks have gone to heck in a handbasket. The idea here is that we're going to share some of that. I remember some years ago, former Mayor Shamel was taking some of us up to Chicago to look at the way they did some of their TIFs. And the way that they did their TIFs was that it didn't all go for like that stadium. It would go to the real people, the people I represent, the people who every day are struggling, as I know a lot of people are representing folks who are struggling to put food on that table, and to have some place for their kids that is safe to go and to play. This town has a lot of great things going for it. The city of St. Louis is getting a lot of young people. Alderman Ortman and I see this every day. A lot of great young people that are coming in. What we're not getting and what we're losing are those families with children. And part of that is because of the way we talk about education. But there's a whole lot of things that go on the table. If you're moving into an area, one of the things you look at is the alleys. At least that's what I look at, and we got to work better at that. But another thing you look at is what kind of playground, what kind of facilities, what kind of parks are around there. And if we're not doing something about that, while we might not be willing to admit it, what we're doing is we're stealing from our kids once again, and we're giving it to other stuff. Other important stuff, but we're stealing from our kids. And I know the alderman from the 6th Ward talked about this, and she was absolutely right about the affordable housing. And we worked all together to get that money back in there. We also worked to try to get the programming money back in for our kids. And I think, even though the alderman from the 17th kind of facetiously said he was willing to sell us out, that this is an important aspect, that we not just put all of our golden eggs, such as they might be great things at Forest Park, but just like the alderwoman from the 19th said, her concern was about how the real people in her ward were going to be able to, get some benefit from that. We can certainly get benefit from fixing our parks and working on that in a good sense. So I would say, yes, the alderman from the 11th is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct that we should be concerned about our fiscal health, and that it always looks difficult when you're going into debt. Many of us went into debt for our houses. Most of us think that that was a good investment. I think an investment in our families and in our children is the best investment we can possibly make.
All right, Alderman from the 15th, you've been at the mic, away from the mic. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I rise in support of Board Bill 190. I recognize that we do have deficit issues, but unfortunately, it's not fair to mitigate our issues on the backs of the parks. We made a commitment to our voters, a promise to them to invest in our parks, and we know that parks are important to our citizens. And it's not fair for us to look at, oh, my park's fine, my park looks fabulous, but there are other parks that don't look so fabulous because we have endured years and years and years of deferred maintenance. And it should be a priority. Parks are important to our children, parks are important to our families, and we can't just care about our own little areas. We have to start recognizing that we are one city and all of our parks are important. And it's important that, like Alderman French invested in his park, he talks about it all the time. He loves his park. We need to love all of our parks. And it's time to do this. and make parks a priority and no longer, you know, mitigating the deficit. The deficit issue is quite complicated, and it's going to get more complicated because of the pension system. But I support Alderman Wessel's idea of going after that money in the Treasury. So thank you. Please consider voting yes on Board Bill 190. It's very important to all of us.
All right, thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. We tend to find ways to say these words about what we promised our constituency and how well we're doing that and how concerned we are. The fact remains, this is a special interest initiative. The majority of the money, not half of the money, the majority of the money will be spent in Forest Park. And I guarantee you, if you blink your eye, all of it will be spent in Forest Park. I'm still going to support it, though. Because you know what? Like I said in the beginning, it's a risk. And I may or may not get some benefits from my ward. I'm going to take that chance. But I'm also going to point my finger at you when it goes awry. Because you should have took time and did your due diligence. Because you know, especially those of you who sit on Ways and Means, you know how much we have borrowed against every damn bond issue we have floating out here. We are in debt to the hilt. We have no capacity at all. None. If this market continues to do what it's doing, we will be sitting here in a horrible condition. Remember last year and the year before where we looked at everything we had and the comptroller's office came to us and said, let's take this little gap we have here. It was $2 million here, $1 million point something here, $1 million here for emergencies, just in case, because we don't know where we're going to be. And we still couldn't balance the budget because we didn't have enough money. So think about the risk. Know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing. I'm probably making a wrong decision. I admit that to my constituency. I'm probably making a wrong decision. But I'm willing to take the risk just in case it works. It's not likely, and again, this is a special interest initiative, and the majority of the money is not going to be used in no parks around this city, so stop saying that. That little small amount of money, when all of us get through fighting over it, you're going to be left out most of the time. But you know, I'm going to fight for mine hard, so I intend to get whatever's there for me. But nobody promised me anything. Nobody called me to the table and said, your park is going, any of my parks were going to get anything in particular. No one ever had a conversation with me. So I know where I am on this particular totem pole, and that's cool too. But you better understand that you are taking a risk for this special interest initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman from the 4th.
Mr. President, I rise in support, but still with doubt. I'd like to ask the Parks and Recreation Director, Mr. Best, to yield.
We can't, he does not have a voice on the floor, so you can go back and have a discussion with him, but we cannot bring him up to speak.
I'll just ask, it's about a program. You know, I talked about earlier about our skating rink. It was too small for us to skate in. In Forest Park, there's a program that's going on where we used to go out to Steinberg skating rink, and blacks would skate, roller skate. Majority of us like to roller skate. In the wintertime, the ice skating rink, whites like to do ice skating. You know, there are very few professional black ice skaters. So in the summer now, when you, point of order, Mr.
Hey, please proceed, Alderman. Could everybody hold it down as the Alderman continues his
in the summer
discussion.
Now, there is no skating, no roller skating. The rink is filled with sand. So if we can't skate in my ward, we can't go out to Forest Park to Steinberg where we paid our taxes to indulge in that type of program. We can't roller skate. But they've got a volleyball goal out there, and sand, fill the rink up with sand where people are playing volleyball, and you can find a designated area on the land, on the grounds, to put the volleyball and let us to continue to roller skate and let the others continue to ice skate in the winter. We have an ice skating rink downtown here. We'll have ice skating rink in Steinberg, but we have no place in Forest Park. So the constituency that I serve, over 150 people or so at any ward meeting, don't feel welcome in Forest Park because of that one aspect, one of those aspects that we have in the park. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Alderman from the first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
How are you?
Mr. President, I rise to support this bill. And I'm supporting this bill because the last bill passed. I'm also supporting this bill because I was told that a certain amount of monies and resources would come to the First Ward and my parks if I supported the bill. And this is why I'm supporting the bill, and I think that's why everybody else is going to support this bill. But let me address the fiscal issue surrounding this bill. It's been alluded to that Ways and Means is going to have a problem in terms of how we're going to pay for the shortfalls that the comptroller was talking about, and there's going to be shortfalls. And what I suspect is that we will continue to have furloughs. We will continue to lay off employees. And like the gentleman, the alderman from the 11th Ward said, the major issue is what are we going to do about the pension funds? And the pension funds are bills that we have no choice but to pay. So when we do that, then there's going to be a reduction of services. So we are going to pay for this. And the bad part about it, we don't know how much we're going to pay. We don't know what the cost is going to be. And the beauty of this, of all of this, is the alderman from the 28th Ward is now the chairman of the Ways and Means. And when she comes back with her a bill, we're going to have to relive this moment. So I'm supporting this bill because it's going to bring benefit to my parks. But there's an issue that the alderman from the 4th Ward made, and he made it 2 or 3 times, and then I heard some other aldermen allude to the fact that we're going to have all of this capital improvement and all of these parks, but where's the security? Where are the park rangers? Where are the police? When you look at what's going on in the Penrose Park, it was magnificent. They came in and they cut down all of the trees, and for the first time in 20 years, we can see the railroad tracks. So we really see the beauty of the park and the panoramic view that's there in Penrose Park. But on the other hand, I have never ever seen a park ranger in O'Fallon Park or in Penrose Park. And when I go through O'Fallon Park on an almost daily basis, I see drug dealers, I see gangs, I see everything in that park. When I go through my park at Penrose, we have auto repairs and everything else going on, and drugs and alcohol and gangbangers and crime, which we're trying to abate now in the parks. So to create this capital improvement, I think at some point in time we need enough park rangers to man the parks. And if we're going to have park rangers manning the parks, writing tickets, then I think that they should have the same capability as the police department, because they write a lot of tickets that are bogus because they can't access the records as can the police to look to see that you have insurance and no felonies and no taxes and everything. So we need a lot of work to make the parks work. And to do that, I think you can't lay off all of the park and recreational centers employees and then expect for the kids to go. Case in point, and then I'll be through. We raised the fee $10 per person to go to the community centers. All of the community centers was empty because the kids could not afford to pay the $10. So they reversed the $10 because the park employees and the community centers employees was there and there was no kids because the kids couldn't afford to go. Now it would appear that the same people that are making these decisions made that decision too, but I hope that the outcome will be different. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. You weren't going to leave me out, were you?
Oh, no, I would never leave you.
In the 9th Ward, before redistricting, we had 8 parks. After redistricting, now we have 7. I've always had constituents complain about parks because of the physical shape that they were in. We have worked very hard in Benton Park neighborhood. We've got a parks committee. You know, we've accomplished a lot in Benton Park with projects that we've already done, but we've still got a long way to go before it's actually physically per se complete. But we do use it now. Right now the neighborhood has, and several neighborhoods contribute into all this. They have concerts, we have movie nights. The last concert in Benton Park, there were approximately 2,000 people that came and visited the park for the music and the activities that happened that day. But again, I've got other parks. There's 7 parks there. I just feel really good if this would pass and we could get these parks complete and just have to worry about the grass complaints because it rained too much in the spring and the Parks Department's behind a day or 2 or 3 days because we've had a week's worth of rain. And of course, this is a citywide bill. It affects all of us, and whatever Forest Park's going to do, you know, I commend them for getting all the extra money that they're getting in this, but we're finally going to get a chance to get some of these little parks and get them taken care of. We passed Metro back in, I think, 2000, and then came the neighborhood parks bill that we passed. And if you're not on Parks Committee, it's really tough to try to, you know, put in your 25% to get 75% in Metro and do these projects that you have. And I'm not saying it's not been fair, because you have to get ahead of the game and you have to get in there, and the administration and the Parks Department, I think, has done a really good job in trying to divvy the money out with aldermen that have put in for the money. But I'm really looking forward to this getting passed and finally getting to a point that all the parks are per se complete. And one more point is, you know, I've been told by realtors, and again, I have 7 parks, that if you live around a park, your property value is a little bit higher, and it really helps. Well, it doesn't really help property value if the park is then such a detrimental, you know, situation, or, you know, the physical condition isn't any good, then it's going to bring down the property value of your property. I mean, that's kind of what I think. But if the park is a living, striving park, and and Benton Park, we put a new playground. You know, we got the comfort station renovated, and it's actually got a little meeting room and a concession room that this just got complete in the past, so we'll be able to start using that. I mean, I would have to get a whole list of everything that we've accomplished in Benton Park, but finally, people walk their dogs through there. People exercise through Benton Park. It's a small park, but it's used. There's the Benton Park Lake, and then there's a round pond in Benton Park. When I first got elected, I put $100,000 aside to get the big lake replaced because it had a plastic liner in it, and as Alderman Schmidt kind of referred earlier, the liner would break and all the water would go drain out into the caves underneath it. But finally, when I got, and BPS gave me an estimate of what it would cost to fix, and finally when I got when I saved that $450,000, you know, I went back and I said, good, we can get this done now. And they said, no, it's going to cost $550. So there goes a couple more years in trying to save capital money to get a project done. Well, by the time I got $550, they put it out for bid. The lowest bid was $820,000. The highest bid was over $1 million. This is just one of the battles to get that lake, the bottom part, replaced, but finally we got it done. Actually, when the contractor got there, we were able to fix the lake and the round pond at the same time. These are some major improvements that don't have to be done at this point in time because we've worked on them, it seems like forever, but it's been my whole political career. So I would hope everyone would really think about what they're doing. And the parks that I have aren't in that Crenolette Park, that Wilmore Park, that O'Fallon Park, I think Fairgrounds Park, the list of the bigger parks that get a little bit more money than all the little parks. So, I mean, I think it's great, and if you figure 7 parks and all the people that live around them, I've got a lot of constituents that this will make happy, that they'll finally have a nice park across the street instead of a park that we're always working on. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I wanted to circle back to the Alderman from the 11th's comments about debt. We've got, sure, we have a debt problem. The parks, we have a budget problem. The parks are not what has caused our debt or budget problem. Investing in the parks is an investment for the 320,000 residents of St. Louis, the children, the families. I don't think we should miss the chance to grab the brass ring on that investment, especially when we've got private donors willing to donate twice what we're investing, because we have a problem with the pension system for 2,000 city employees. I think we got to represent those 320,000 residents of the city first and make that investment first and fix the problem with the pensions as a separate problem. Not delay fixing the problem with the pensions because we can borrow from money that the voters have said we want this spent on parks for our children and our families. And if we can't do that, if we're going to take that money to buttress the pension system year after year, I think shame on us, because that's not what the voters said they wanted that money spent on. And that's all. Thank you.
All right. Any further? Alderman from the 10th.
Hey, well, I was hoping that Alderman Vaccaro's pastor could come back and talk for a half hour. But I don't know how many folks, you know, I spent a life, I ran a retail store for 12 years, and then I purchased a tavern for the last 23 years. And when you sell retail, people tell you things. You go to sales classes. There's an old tale of a man who ran a store, and every day he would go to his store, he'd reinvest in his inventory. He'd clean his store. He would put money into the store to make people want to come to the store. He made a good living. He sent his kid to college. The boy comes back from college and works for his dad for a few months and says, "Dad, why are we in debt? Why are you spending money on all this inventory? We only need this much. We only need this much. We don't need that much. We don't need to put the money making the store look so nice. People will still come." Well, he says, "Don't you know we're in a recession, Dad? We need to cut back." His dad, thinking the college had made his son very wise, listened to his son and cut back on his inventory, cut back on keeping the store so tidy, cut back on reinvesting in his inventory, and within 6 months the store is closed. The customers quit coming. So he turned to his son, he said, "Son, I guess, you know, college made you smart. You were right. We are in a recession." And the point being, this city is one big retail store. If you want people to come to your store, you reinvest in your inventory. The most inventory that people see on a daily basis are our public parks. That's what brings people to the city. It's very simple. You don't reinvest. Who wants to have a house across from a muddy field? Who wants to have a house? Who wants to come to a zoo that has 2 animals? You know? It's, to me, I'm a common sense kind of guy. So with that, I rise in support of this bill and ask that my name be put on as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. I had the Alderman from the 10th, his name to co-sponsor for Board Bill number 190, floor substitute.
So noted.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 17th, you recognize to close.
My colleague from the 28th, and I want to confirm this, the alderman from the 9th, did you want to be added as co-sponsor? Or? Yeah.
Could you please add the alderman from the 9th as a co-sponsor? And also the alderman from the 14th as a co-sponsor.
So noted.
You can now close, Alderman.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Gosh, last week we got out of here in 10 seconds, and I was all expecting to be out of here about an hour ago, and I am kind of surprised by the reaction today. But given that, I did want to go ahead and close with, we've talked a lot about the, I just had to check this. I asked my colleague from the 28th. She got her sides of the brain confused as well. So the left side is your rational side of the brain. That's the thing that does the math. And I'm kind of a math guy, so I think a lot about numbers and things like that. And in my mind, we've talked a lot about that today. We have disagreements, honest disagreements about the numbers in this. But in my calculation, the idea of getting free money by going ahead and making a commitment to spend money on parks for a long time in the future that will at some point reduce or eliminate our obligation to do that so that we can take that money and spend it somewhere else is money wisely borrowed. So we've talked a lot about the left side of the brain. I want to talk a little bit about the right side of the brain. There is something primal. There's something that we're all born with, this desire of communing with nature. And that's what parks are about. And it's really hard to put a number on that. I always fancy myself a good mathematician, but you can't really measure that. Maybe if you measure sales prices across the street from them. But there's something that is really primal about that. And it moves people, and it makes difference in their lives. I'm a bit of a history buff, and there's a great book about Robert Moses, who was, for many, many years, the dominant force in all the public infrastructure in New York City. And in that book, they talk about the early park movements of the early 1900s and how people were feeling so closed in and so claustrophobic in New York that they started building the park system of New York City. And what a difference the parks made, and how people up there embraced it, and how over all these decades since it was built, nobody has ever infringed upon Central Park. And it's just amazing to read about the history of the parks movement. And when we think about that, and much of our park, Forest Park, was designed by the very person who designed Central Park. Our city started incorporating many of the themes that grew out of that movement in New York City as we built our park system. And of course, when transportation was expensive before World War II, we had lots of people living in the city. We almost got up to 1 million people. And then after World War II, gasoline got cheap and the interstate came along and people started moving. And why did they leave? They left for bigger backyards, to live on acre lots and more grass and so forth. Even with that, the county has invested in their park system. I agree, I respect but disagree with my colleague from the 11th Ward on everything that he said, with one exception, and I disagree and I really find fault with that, is that he said that the donations would come next year or whenever because they're always going to be there. Well, some people give for causes, and I think that the people who are going to give us money for Forest Park are giving for a cause. They relate to that primal urge, that desire to commune with nature. And I think they're giving that money because they want to go ahead and protect and preserve green space. And I think if we go ahead and tell them no, they might very well go ahead and take that and give that to St. Louis County to keep their park system open. And I think that's a risk we have to think about. And I think it's a legitimate concern that people can take their money and move it somewhere else. Now, earlier I said that I don't really have any money out of this bill. I have about $100,000 as chairman of parks. To get $100,000 out of a $64 million bond issue I'm really probably not doing my job, but I lied a little bit. I'm 53 years old, and My entire life, with the exception of 4 years I went away from school, I lived within 3 blocks of Forest Park. I love Forest Park. As a kid, I walked up there and played ball. I learned how to ride my bike up there. When I got to be 16, my dad taught me to drive my car there. Now it's years later, that's where my son learned how to ride his bike. That's where he learned to drive his car. People go to the park for various reasons, to commune with nature. For me, my biggest reason for going there was to run. That was where I'd clear my head. And I jogged when I was younger, my legs were good. And I would run around the park, and over the years, I put in probably 20,000 miles or more. I used to run a couple marathons back in the day. And I would run morning, noon, night. And something happened to me one year. I was out there, I couldn't get my run in before work, so I was out there late at night in the wintertime, and it was snowing. And it was just absolutely beautiful. And there's a corner of the park, and you talk about this communing with nature and what it meant to me. And one of my favorite poems is Robert Frost. And I stood there in the snow, and I thought of that, Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though, so he will not see me stopping here, watching his woods fill up with snow. My horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near on this darkest day of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to see if there's some mistake. The only other sound is sweep of wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. I think about that every time I run, and if I'm lucky, I get a couple runs in a year where it's snowing out, and I'm in the park with the white hush of snow. I'm in the middle of a city, and I can't hear a thing. It is so soft and beautiful there. Other people have their own experiences. I don't know what yours is, if it's Forest Park or Carondelet Park or one of the other great parks of our city. It might be at Shakespeare's in the park, or it might be something you did with your children at the zoo. When I talked about this, I said this is an opportunity for us to tell our children or our grandchildren that we made our park system special, and that if this works right, we're going to end up endowing Forest Park so that when you take your grandchildren or children and have that intergenerational experience, they'll know that that experience will be there for them and their grandchildren. I'd like to conclude by paraphrasing the poet Frost, by let us this day vote before we sleep, to forever keep Forest Park lovely, dark, and deep. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 190. Floor substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. There's been a request for previous roll. There was an objection to previous roll. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Triplett, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmidt, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruson, President Reed.
Aye.
"24 aye votes, 4 no votes."
By vote, your third read and finally passed Board Bill number 190, floor substitute, and upheld the Motion of the Alderman from the 17th.
That's the extent of third reading, report of engrossment.
Report of enrollment.
Board Bills 189, floor substitute, 190, floor substitute.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. Move for adoption of our courtesy resolution. Can I entertain a second on that motion? Seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. First reading resolutions.
Resolution 260, sponsored by Alderman Villa, Enterprise Zone for Intelgrany Elevator Company.
Alderman from the 11th, you recognize on the first reading resolution number 260.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I respectfully request that Board Resolution number 260 be assigned to your Committee on Housing and Urban Development.
All right, would you like to make a motion for that? Make a motion that it be assigned to the committee, and then we'll get a second vote on it.
I thought I did, but I apologize. You can rephrase it for me.
Yeah, okay. I'll accept that as a motion.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Moved by the Alderman from the 11th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please assign resolution numbers 260.
So noted. That's the extent of first reading of resolution.
Second reading.
The following resolution was reported out of the Health and Human Services Committee. Resolution 242, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Alderman Conway. The Board of Aldermen, pursuant to Ordinance 65435, the Health and Human Services Committee does hereby approve the recommendations of the Director for the appropriation of the Animal Protection Facility Restoration Fund account funds.
Alderman from the 8th.
Mr. President, just to let everyone know that the Health and Human Services Committee approved that resolution regarding stray dogs and cats, and we do appreciate the support and all of the hard work of many of the aldermen here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Thursday, Streets Committee meeting, 11 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Friday, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers. That's the last meeting until January 2012. We will be on a holiday break. The Board of Aldermen holiday party will be at 5 o'clock, lasting until 7 o'clock in the chambers. That's the extent of my announcements.
We also, before we move further, the Alderwoman from the 15th, her birthday is tomorrow, I believe, and the Alderman from the 3rd, his just passed. So let's all wish them a happy birthday. The Alderman from the 20th would like us to sing happy birthday to him. You guys ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. I'm out of here. Happy birthday to you, and many more. The Alderman from the 4th said I was out of tune. He told me to move away from the mic. So anyway, Alderman from the 15th, you've worked a lot of years of making sure everybody got together on their birthday. You had functions, you brought cakes and everything, so we really wish you a very happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you. This is a big one for me. I'll be okay. Yeah. I'm going to be okay. Thank you. I'd like to invite everybody to come to South Grand tomorrow, Saturday, from 8:30 to probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We have the Grinch on South Grand at Mokabee's, at Arsenal and Grand. You can have breakfast, you can get your picture taken, but it's really, really fun. So I'm inviting you to that. And then there's something on a more serious note, that we need our employees to be aware that Mercer is conducting an audit of health insurance. And so if you are an employee that has children, in this audit, they're asking you to provide proof that you are the parent to these children. Our employees have until December 30th to provide this information. If they do not provide this information, our employees' children will lose their insurance in February. So this is very important, and so we need to find a way to get this information out. Thank you.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, if I was to have to guess their age, I would say 39 and 59.
There you go.
And I'm not going to say which is which. Anyway, Cherokee Antique Row this weekend, December 3rd and 4th, has their annual cookie spree. So if you're not doing anything and want to come down and shop and walk the street, I would do it Saturday because they're saying the weather's going to be a little bit worse Sunday. But come either day, they'll be open. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I believe Jennifer noted that the age she is turning today is the age that Freeman was on the day she was born.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Tomorrow, December 3rd, which is National Put a Roof Over Your Head Day for you folks who didn't know that, we have the Chill on the Hill Run taking place on the hill, starting at St. Ambrose, winding through the streets. If you would like to participate, get there around 6:30 in the morning. Also tomorrow afternoon and evening is Christmas on the Hill. There will be carriage rides. Santa will be there storytelling. They'll be roasting chestnuts on Marconi Avenue. So please come by. 5 o'clock is the starting time for that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. President. Calling a public safety meeting Wednesday, December 7th at 10 a.m. We will be discussing that JAG bill that's in there, as well as discussing the crime prevention dollars. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to invite everyone to the Teens and Tucks cotillion tonight at Harris-Stowe Auditorium from 5:30 to 8 o'clock. This is some of the Prop S money that was allocated, and most especially those of you who serve on the Public Safety Committee, you'll have an opportunity to see what the KDAM Foundation does with those funds on behalf of the city of St. Louis. They operate out of Gamble Center, Wohl Center, and the Innovative Concept Academy, which is Blewett School with Judge Jimmy Edwards, and they've also done programming at Booter Community Center. So I'll give you a chance to see these young people and how they have evolved and how we keep them off the street and prepare them for the future. I'd also like to say good luck to the East St. Louis Flyers. They're on their way tomorrow to a national competition, and I wish them the best and hope that they win. And I also wanted to say, in the spirit of the holiday, and you know you have a lot of helpers. Santa has a lot of helpers. And we need to recognize our helpers as well. One of our helpers, Terrence, had a birthday in November that we did not recognize. And Donna Booker just had a birthday that we did not recognize. And so I'd like to say a belated happy birthday to them, and thank you for being our helpers.
Yeah, thank you. Any further announcement? Alderman from 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, thanks to all of you today. I know it's been a long meeting as a result of the Forest Park bills, so appreciate your long attention span here. But then secondly, there are two really fun events going on in the 28th Ward this weekend. It sounds like many events all over the city. The first one is at Greg Freeman Park, which is at the corner of DePere and Kingsbury in Skinker to Bolivar. It's called Winter Market. It's a great place to get gifts. There are a lot of handmade gifts and crafts and honey and jewelry and all kinds of things there. They also will have music, and they'll have some good barbecue. And the other event going on in the 28th Ward is the Central West End Walk, which is tomorrow afternoon. A lot of good shopping in the shops, but also some reindeer and various animals on Maryland there, and fun stuff for the kids to do. So come by the Central West End as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Continuing with activities for the weekend. This is the weekend for the Soulard Parlor Tour. It's Saturday and Sunday, so get your tickets if you're interested. It's a fun time. And then next Sunday will be the Lafayette Square House Tour. So again, you have an opportunity to view a beautiful neighborhood there. You may have seen me running around today in the chamber. On Monday night from 5 to 7 at the Wine Bar 33, there will be a fundraiser for Peabody Elementary. So anybody who would like to support a local public school, be sure to show up there, and they would be happy for your support. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the motion excuse.
All aldermen are present.
You recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn the meeting until Friday, 10 a.m., December 9th.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.